And he looks at him and he's like, when you get home, tell Sarah I kept my promise. I made it count. And then he just pulls the pins out and he just runs off into the smoke. And welcome to our channel.
I'm Prams. I tell you crazy stories from around the world.
And I'm Dan, and I butcher those stories. So if you're into that kind of stuff, like and subscribe. And with that, let's get on with our story.
We're in Australia, 1932. The Great Depression is wreaking havoc on farmers. Wheat fields are dying, the economy is collapsing, and the future looks bleak. But in the middle of it all, the farmers face a much more unexpected threat. One that no one could have predicted. The emus. They're like Australia's native version of an ostrich. Big AF flightless birds, and they ain't scared of no one. So thousands of emus, yes, thousands, began descending on farms in the coast of Western Australia. You see, Australia was experiencing a great drought at the time, which forced roughly 20,000 emus to migrate from the arid Australian desert toward the more fertile coast in search of water and food. And they were hungry, really hungry. Farmers watched in disbelief as these giant birds in search of food trampled over their crops, destroyed fences, and wreaked havoc on their livelihoods. You see, after World War I, many soldiers were given land in Australia through a government scheme. The idea was to help them settle back into civilian life. But the reality? Poor land, bad soil, and little rain. The soldiers turned farmers were fighting a losing battle. By the early 1930s, the Great Depression had slammed Australia. Wheat prices plummeted and the government's promised subsidies never arrived. Farmers were hanging on by a thread, and if that wasn't enough, those emus were the icing on the cake. As emus began decimating the already struggling farms, the government decided to step in the only way they knew how: brute force. So they sent in the big guns to deal with some big birds. The plan? Kill as many emus as possible to save the crops. Simple, right? So, the soldiers roll in with their two rusty Lewis machine guns, 10,000 rounds of ammo, and a mission to take down the avian menace.
So do you ever look in history and think, how the fuck did we get here? I love how these feathery bastards were causing havoc in Australia. You know, I imagine them being outside McDonald's at 2 a.m, drinking, smoking, antisocial behaviour, you know, catcalling women, happy slapping people and putting it on Insta, driving mopeds up and down illegally. And I guess the government was like, yeah, we need to deal with this problem. I can just imagine Grandpa telling a story to the kids. Kids, it's November 32, Australia. I was there. The wheat sways in the wind. It's peaceful, almost beautiful. And they came out of nowhere. 20,000 hostiles flanking us from left to right. Looking at them, they'd make your blood run cold. And I imagine the emus are closing in. You know, they're in the trenches. He looks over at Sarge and he's like, I'm gonna go slow them down. And he's like, Cooper, no! That's suicide! And he looks at him and he's like, when you get home, tell Sarah I kept my promise. I made it count. And then he just pulls the pins out and he just runs off into the smoke.
Well, this is how the scene actually played out. By November 1932, the soldiers were ready and their guns set, in time to catch the emus on their daily rampage. Instead of staying in tight herds that could be easily targeted by machine guns, the emus instinctively split into small scattered groups at the first sign of trouble, running and effectively dodging the bullets. So these aren't just ordinary birds. They're fast, they're smart, and they're everywhere. The soldiers, armed with automatic weapons, quickly learned that the birds weren't just running in a straight line. They were fast, they were unpredictable, and they knew how to evade. This isn't just a hunting trip. It's a battle, and they might be losing. After firing thousands of rounds and barely making a dent, the soldiers retreat to rethink their strategy. After a brief hiatus and some serious reconsideration, the military comes back. The second phase of the battle begins under a seemingly new and improved strategy. The soldiers fire, and this time they hit more targets. But every shot counts, and the birds also adapt to this new military tactic. They scatter in smaller groups, evading the bullets with terrifying agility. The soldiers genuinely could not keep up with them. The emus are just too quick. They're outwitting the soldiers, who are getting exhausted. They fired thousands of rounds, but the birds just keep coming. And so, after weeks of fighting, the government finally called it. The Emu War was over. The soldiers? Defeated. The emus? Still standing. After several weeks, only about 1,000 of the 20,000 emus were confirmed killed, and the military withdrew. The government later banned direct military intervention altogether in favor of a bounty system, which proved much more effective in curbing the population. Now that you've heard the full story, what are your thoughts?
How the did they lose? I mean, seriously, they went in there with heavy artillery and then came back with their tails between their legs. I love how they made this a bounty thing. You know, driven it underground. Now it's just a network of assassins. You know, you got the farmers. Instead of getting the pitchforks, now they've got their gun in hand, silencer on. You've got that one emu who he just wants a simple life. He just wants to move on. And he gets a text, bounties on his head. It's like, and they're sending farmers after him, one after one. And you know, and he's like, takes it, you know, takes them out. You know, he takes a pencil, takes another one out. That to stop them coming after him, he needs to cut the head off the snake. And it's just like the head of the farmers' union or something.
So, is there a moral of the story here?
A moral? Yeah. I think if they did not just come at them, they might have been better off. I think they should have worked with them and then turned them into a weapon. You know, take them to the front lines of the real war. It would have been a different world by now, I think.
It's a good idea. They could have rode them into battle or something, you know?
Yeah, that's it, man. You know, take the assassins, double your numbers.